community. We're speaking with Dr. Chike Akua, educational revolutionary. I'm telling you, you've been so insightful talking to us about having a black culture identity, so that we don't have the tensions and the apprehensions when it comes to supporting black students, supporting black businesses as well. I want you to speak to us about public school scandals. Especially with urban schools, that really affect the black community. Some of it we've seen in the news, and some has not been in the news. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, I think the biggest scandal overall is that our children continue to be miseducated, and that there is the assumption of underachievement with our children. Over the years, they've come up with many different ways of explaining it, but many of those ways oftentimes miss the mark. They talk about the achievement gap, for example. Supposedly, the gap between white student achievement and black student achievement, as if white students are the standard. But oftentimes, white student achievement is mediocre at best. And so we're not trying to supposedly come up to the level of white student mediocrity. We're after black excellence. And so we want to close the gap between current black achievement and black excellence. That leads me to talk about some things that my parents shared with me. My father went to the historic Dunbar High School in Washington, D.C. This is during the times of segregation. And Dunbar High School was an academic powerhouse that routinely outperformed all students black and white, all schools black and white. My mother went to the historic Sumner High School in Kansas City, Kansas, another academic and athletic powerhouse that routinely outperformed all schools black and white. I used to teach at Huntington Middle School in Newport News, Virginia. During the times of segregation, it was Huntington High School, another academic powerhouse that routinely outperformed white schools. And so we had a track record of black excellence in schools that we controlled. We did not ask for integration, we asked for desegregation. Don't bus my child across town, bust the money back into my community. And that's what we've gotten away from. And that to me is the biggest scandal.
Wow. And so that's happening everywhere. And so when you look at how it was, how the system, the educational system was, when you were going to school in your earlier days, and in contrast to how students are what they're experiencing today, what have you seen as some of the differences between what was happening when you were going versus now?
I can't so much use myself as an example because I struggled tremendously. Actually, I do use myself as an example. When I was in high school, I had a 1.9 GPA. And I hope that's not an indication of my intelligence. But through a dramatic transformation, I was able to raise a 1.9 GPA to a 3.9 GPA. And that happened primarily through knowledge of self, through learning the truth about my history and culture. And so I was in a culturally isolated space where I was not surrounded by black excellence in school. I was surrounded by black excellence at home and in my community. And thankfully, I had a family and community safety net that was able to catch me when I started falling academically. But for so many of our children today, that family and community safety net is not there. And so that's one of the reasons why we struggle.
Right. So what are your thoughts on homeschooling, charter schools, and public schools?
So I think homeschooling is a great idea that more and more black parents are turning to. Certainly, me and my wife have homeschooled our children at various stages of their educational journey. And the research literature shows that over 250,000 black families are homeschooling their children, and that number is rising because they're becoming so disenchanted with the public school system.
Wow, that's good. That's good. So there's a value to homeschooling, and it helps our children also really to be sensitive and understanding culture.
Sure.
It is a way to help students to understand culture. Why go to school today? We have, you have grandparents raising young people. You have parents that are raising their kids. There's resistance by some students to not go to school. Why go to school today? Why is it important to have black excellence?
Well, that's a really good question when you ask why go to school, because many of our children are choosing not to. We're familiar with the work of Dr. Carter G. Woodson in the book, The Miseducation of the Negro. And miseducation is when you're not taught the truth about your history and culture, and you're not equipped to then provide for yourself and your community. And Mwalimu Barudi says that miseducation leads to diseducation. And diseducation means you've lied to me so much, I've just completely mentally checked out of school. Okay, so we've gone from miseducation to diseducation. But you ask, why should our children go to education? Well, go to school. Education is still proven to be an absolute game changer from a professional standpoint and economically if it's properly guided. And that's the key. One of the things I tell high school students when I'm asked to speak in high schools is that if you decide to go to college, that's a wonderful thing, but it's not enough. You need to develop a skill or a trade to make sure that that accentuates your college education.
Okay. Oh, that's very good. That's very good. Lucas, good morning. How are you? Lucas, good morning.
Good morning. How are you, Queen?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you doing, brother?
I'm blessed, brother. How are you?
I'm blessed myself. Wonderful conversation that you're having this morning. A beautiful conversation. You know, psychological indoctrination through education on behalf of the populace is a terrible thing.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is the wise mentality is to examine the totality of reality. Now, this is what education can do. I've read the Bible, and it talks about Samson and Delilah. How Samson fell in a deep sleep, and Delilah cut his hair, and the stress was away from him. Now let's examine the totality of that reality through education. We have to be able to look behind the narrative and see the truth. Now, do you really think that's what happened?
Well, I think a number of the biblical stories serve to illuminate a deeper point. So, for example, if he fell asleep, there's a way that we can fall asleep in terms of our consciousness, fall asleep in terms of our character, fall asleep in terms of our commitment. And when we fall asleep, then we're vulnerable to being manipulated. And it's funny because maybe that's why, you know, young folk today say that you got to stay woke. But as I tell my sons, you can be woke and still be in the bed. So it's not enough to be woke. You got to get up.
That's right.
You got to get up and stand up and clean up, and then we'll be on the path to success. Thank you so much, brother.
Thank you, my brother. John, how are you this morning?
Good morning. I'm enjoying the conversation between you and the doctor. Good morning to him, too. My mother used to always say, in order for you to know where you're going, you have to know where you come from. He advocated the past and do the future. And I tell you, the so-called 75th anniversary of D-Day, and I look at two of the different channels, and all I see is them and nothing about us. The media loves to brainwash us and distort us to think we weren't a part of history. We did not serve in any war in this country's history. How many kids know that African American men and women served in World War II? How many kids know that the first African American major, female major, during World War II was Major Sharon Adams Early with a regiment of 855 women under her command, African American women under her command. These tidbits and professors were not talked about. The miseducation of the media of schools with miseducation and don't know what they know who they were, where they came from, and what they achieved. I'd like to hear the doctor's perspective on it.
Thank you so much, brother. And
Doctor, I tell you what, we're going to get your response to that shortly. We'll be back right here on 1380 WAOK News and Talk.
I love intelligent black talk radio. That's why I listen to The Movement with Dr. F. Keith Slaughter on News and Talk 1380 WAOK.